It was a regular Tuesday morning, the kind where everything feels predictable. I had just finished my coffee, scrolling through emails on my phone while the kids got ready for school. My mind was already running through the day's to-do list. Grocery shopping, laundry, maybe even sneaking in a quick workout if I was lucky. But then, something unusual caught my attention. A notification popped up on my phone from the security system we'd installed last year. Motion detected near property line, it read. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was a deer or one of the neighborhood cats wandering around. Curiosity got the better of me, though, so I opened the app and checked the live feed from the camera. What I saw made my heart stop. There were bulldozers and workers tearing into the empty lot next to my backyard. But wait, that wasn't the neighbor's land. It was mine. The realization hit me like a punch in the gut. This was private property, land that belonged to me and my family, and they were destroying it. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief bubbling inside me. Without thinking twice, I grabbed my coat and stormed outside. The chilly morning air bit at my skin as I marched toward the commotion. When I reached the edge of my property, I shouted at the foreman overseeing the chaos. "What are you doing?" I yelled, waving my arms wildly to get his attention. The man stopped what he was doing and turned to look at me. He didn't seem surprised or apologetic, just annoyed, like I was interrupting something important. "We're building a Texaco," he said matter-of-factly, glancing down at his clipboard. "Got full approval from the HOA. From the HOA. I repeated, my voice rising in disbelief. "This is private property. You can't just build here without permission." He gave me a smug look, the kind that told me he didn't care about my protests. "Take it up with them," he said dismissively before turning back to his work. The sound of machinery roared again, drowning out anything else I might have said. Standing there, watching strangers tear apart my land, I felt powerless. How could this happen? Who gave them the right? I wanted to scream, to fight back, but I knew I needed answers first. So I went back inside, my mind racing. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just any homeowner. I worked as a county inspector for the government. If anyone could figure out what was going on, it was me. As I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the live feed from the security camera, I realized this wasn't just about my property anymore. It was about standing up for what was right. These people thought they could walk all over me because I was just another face in the crowd, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. I wasn't going to let them get away with this, not without a fight. That night, after the kids were asleep, I couldn't stop thinking about the situation. Something about it didn't add up. Why would the HOA approve such a project without consulting me? Why was everyone acting like this was normal? I decided to dig deeper, using my access to county records to uncover the truth. Little did I know, what I was about to discover would change everything, not just for me, but for the entire neighborhood. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose, but also dread. My mind kept replaying the scene from the day before, bulldozers tearing into my land, workers ignoring my protests, and that foreman's smug expression as he dismissed me like I was nothing. It wasn't just anger that fueled me now. It was determination. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to stop until I got them. My first step was calling the HOA office. After several rings, a woman answered. Her voice was sugary sweet, the kind of tone people use when they're trying too hard to sound helpful. "Good morning, Willow Creek HOA. This is Karen speaking. How can I assist you?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Hi, this is Lisa Harper. I live at 1428 Maple Lane. I'm calling because there's construction happening on my property right now, and I'd like to know why." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought she might have hung up. Then, finally, she spoke. "Oh, Ms. Harper, right? Let me assure you, all permits have been filed appropriately. Your parcel was designated surplus land by the association." Surplus land? I repeated, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay composed. What do you mean, surplus? That's my property. You can't just take it and call it surplus. Her tone shifted slightly, becoming more defensive. Well, according to our records, the land isn't being utilized to its full potential. We've partnered with Texaco to develop it for the benefit of the community. The benefit of the community? I snapped, unable to hide my frustration anymore. How does building a gas station on my private property benefit anyone except maybe Texaco, and whoever approved this without asking me? She hesitated again, clearly caught off guard by my pushback. I'll need to look into that, she said quickly, her voice losing some of its earlier confidence. Someone will contact you shortly to explain further. But no one did. Hours passed, then an entire day, and still I heard nothing from the HOA. It was like they were hoping I'd forget about it or give up. They didn't know me very well, if that's what they thought. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat down at my laptop with a cup of tea. As a county inspector, I had access to zoning records, permit applications, and other official documents. If the HOA had gone through proper channels to approve this project, there would be a paper trail. And if they hadn't, well, that would tell me everything I needed to know. Logging into the county database felt almost surreal. Normally, I used these tools for work-related tasks, checking compliance reports, reviewing safety standards, that sort of thing. But tonight, I was using them to investigate something deeply personal. My hands trembled slightly as I typed in my address and pulled up the records for my property. To my shock, there was absolutely no record of any approved permit for commercial development on my land. Not only that, but the zoning designation clearly stated residential. There was no legal basis whatsoever for what they were doing. Someone, probably the HOA, had forged documents or fabricated permissions to make it seem legitimate. As I scrolled through page after page of information, a cold realization settled over me. This wasn't just negligence or oversight. It was intentional. The HOA had knowingly broken the law, thinking they could get away with it because most homeowners wouldn't question them. They gambled on silence, on apathy, on fear, but they hadn't counted on me. By the time I closed my laptop, my head was spinning. Questions swirled in my mind. Why would the HOA risk so much to build a gas station? Who stood to gain from this? And how far were they willing to go to protect their secret? One thing was certain, I couldn't tackle this alone. If I wanted to fight back, I'd need help. But where could I turn? Who would believe me? For the first time in days, though, I felt a flicker of hope. I might not have all the answers yet, but I had proof. And sometimes, that's all you need to start turning the tide. The next morning, I woke up with a plan forming in my mind. Confronting the HOA directly wouldn't work. They'd already shown me they weren't interested in listening. If I wanted to uncover the truth, I needed to gather more evidence. And what better way to do that than by blending in and playing along? I decided to visit the construction site again. But this time, I wouldn't go as an angry homeowner. Instead, I'd pose as someone who belonged there, an inspector. After all, I was a county inspector, though not for projects like this. Still, with a little improvisation, I could pull it off. That afternoon, I borrowed one of Tom's neon safety vests from his HVAC toolbox. I paired it with oversized safety glasses and a clipboard I found in the garage. To complete the look, I clipped a fake badge to my belt, a leftover prop from a school play the kids had done years ago. Standing in front of the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked official, confident, and ready to investigate. When I arrived at the site, the workers barely glanced at me. They were too busy hauling equipment and shouting instructions to notice some random inspector walking around. I made a point of jotting things down on my clipboard, pretending to take detailed notes. Every now and then, I stopped to ask questions. "Hey, can you tell me where the electrical plans are posted?" I asked one worker casually. He shrugged, pointing toward a trailer at the edge of the site. "Probably in there," he muttered before going back to hammering. Inside the trailer, I found stacks of blueprints and documents scattered across a table. My heart raced as I flipped through them, snapping quick photos with my phone. The paperwork confirmed what I already suspected. The project was riddled with shortcuts and violations. Wiring schematics were incomplete, drainage plans were missing entirely, and fire safety measures seemed like an afterthought. While I was gathering intel, I struck up a conversation with a foreman named Rick. He was older, grizzled, and clearly frustrated with how things were being handled. As we chatted during a cigarette break, I steered the conversation toward the timeline of the project. "They're rushing this thing," Rick said under his breath, shaking his head. "Usually takes months to get these kinds of projects approved and underway. But apparently, someone high up cut a deal with the HOA. "High up?" I asked, trying to sound casual, like city council. Rick shrugged. "Could be. All I know is, this place better not blow up. Half the wiring looks janky as hell." His words sent a chill down my spine. Not only were they illegally developing my land, but they were cutting corners dangerously. If something went wrong, and given the shoddy workmanship, it likely would, the consequences could devastate the entire neighborhood. As I left the site later that day, my mind was racing. The pieces were starting to come together. Forged permits, illegal development, dangerous shortcuts, and shady deals involving the HOA. Someone powerful was pulling strings behind the scenes, and I needed to figure out who. But I also knew I couldn't keep this to myself. If I wanted to stop them, I'd need allies, people who could help me expose the truth. That evening, I called my boss at the county office, John Martinez. He was a seasoned investigator with decades of experience sniffing out corruption. I trusted him enough to share what I'd discovered. "John, I need your help," I said when he answered. "There's something big going on here, and I think it goes way beyond just my property." After explaining everything, including the forged permits and suspicious timeline, John agreed to dig deeper. Using his connections, we subpoenaed bank statements and financial records tied to the HOA. What we uncovered shocked even him. Massive payouts funneled directly from a regional oil conglomerate to key members of the HOA board. One name kept popping up: Mrs. Evelyn Hargrove, the HOA president herself. Armed with irrefutable proof, I realized this wasn't just about stopping a gas station anymore. It was about taking down a corrupt system that had been exploiting homeowners for years. And I was ready to fight, not just for myself, but for everyone in Willow Creek. With the evidence piling up, I knew it was time to escalate things. John Martinez, my boss at the county office, had pulled strings to get us access to financial records and bank statements tied to the HOA. What we found was beyond anything I'd imagined. It wasn't just about one illegal project on my land. It was a web of corruption that stretched far beyond Willow Creek. The documents revealed a disturbing pattern. Large sums of money had been transferred directly from a regional oil conglomerate to key members of the HOA board. The payments were disguised as consulting fees or community improvement grants, but the amounts were staggering, far too high to be legitimate. One name kept appearing over and over again: Evelyn Hargrove, the HOA president. She was at the center of everything, acting as the middleman between the oil company and the homeowners association. Apparently, she'd struck a secret deal to lease portions of residential properties for commercial development. By labeling certain lots as surplus or underutilized, she bypassed traditional zoning laws entirely. Homeowners like me never stood a chance. We trusted the HOA to act in our best interests, not sell us out to the highest bidder. But the worst part, this wasn't an isolated incident. According to the records, similar schemes had been carried out across multiple neighborhoods. Most people either didn't notice or assumed resistance was futile. They let it slide, too overwhelmed by legal jargon or afraid of retaliation. That's how the HOA got away with it for so long. As I sat in John's office, Staring at the mountain of incriminating evidence, I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. How could someone abuse their power like this? These weren't just numbers on paper. They represented lives disrupted, communities fractured, and trust shattered. And now, thanks to Evelyn's greed, my family and neighbors were caught in the crossfire. "We need to take this public," I said finally, breaking the silence. "People deserve to know what's really going on." John nodded, his expression grim. "Agreed. But we have to be smart about it. If we move too quickly, they'll cover their tracks. We need to build a solid case first." He suggested filing subpoenas to gather even more documentation, emails, meeting minutes, anything that could connect the dots. He also recommended reaching out to affected homeowners discreetly, gathering testimonies without tipping off the HOA. It was risky, but necessary. The stronger our case, the harder it would be for them to deny responsibility. That night, as I drove home, my mind raced with possibilities. Who else in Willow Creek had fallen victim to this scheme? Were there others willing to speak up, or had fear silenced them completely? I knew I couldn't fight this battle alone. I needed allies, people who understood the stakes and were brave enough to stand up for what was right. When I walked through the door, Tom looked up from his laptop, concern etched on his face. "You okay?" he asked. "You seem intense." I hesitated, unsure how much to tell him. Then I realized I didn't have to shield him anymore. He deserved to know the truth. Sitting down at the kitchen table, I laid it all out: the forged permits, the shady deals, the danger lurking beneath the surface of our quiet neighborhood. To my relief, Tom didn't hesitate. "What can I do to help?" he asked simply. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Together, we started making plans. Over the next few days, I reached out to trusted neighbors, sharing what I'd uncovered. At first, some were skeptical, unsure if they wanted to get involved. But when I showed them the evidence, their skepticism turned to outrage. Sarah, Mr. Grayson, and a handful of others agreed to join forces, forming a coalition determined to expose the truth. We held secret meetings in basements and garages, strategizing late into the night. Each story added fuel to our fire. Stories of intimidation, coercion, and blatant disregard for property rights. Slowly but surely, we pieced together a plan to hold the HOA accountable. By the time we were done, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about stopping a gas station. It was about reclaiming our autonomy, reminding ourselves that we weren't powerless pawns in someone else's game. And no matter what happened next, we were ready to fight. The day of the HOA meeting arrived, and I felt a strange mix of nerves and determination. This was it, the moment we'd been preparing for. The coalition had worked tirelessly over the past week, gathering testimonies, organizing documents, and rehearsing our strategy. We weren't just going to confront them. We were going to expose them in front of everyone. When I walked into the community center, the room buzzed with tension. Every seat was filled, and latecomers stood along the walls, whispering anxiously. It was clear that word had spread. People sensed something big was about to happen. The air felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. Mrs. Hargrove took her place at the podium, wearing her usual polished attire, a tailored blazer, perfectly styled hair, and an air of authority that made most people shrink back. But not today. Today, she looked uneasy, glancing around the room as if sensing trouble brewing. Before she could begin her opening remarks, I stood up from my seat near the front. All eyes turned to me as I stepped into the aisle, clutching a folder stuffed with evidence. Before we proceed, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I'd like to address an urgent matter concerning recent developments on several properties, including mine." The murmurs started immediately. Some residents leaned forward in their seats, curious. Others exchanged worried glances, clearly unsure what to expect. Mrs. Hargrove's smile faltered slightly, but she tried to maintain her composure. "What is this about, Miss Harper?" she asked, her tone clipped. "This," I replied, handing her a copy of the incriminating documents, is about illegal development, forged permits, and secret deals that have been stealing from us, all under your watch. Her face went pale as she flipped through the pages. Whispers erupted throughout the room as people craned their necks to see what was written. I didn't wait for her to respond. Instead, I turned to address the crowd directly. These so-called surplus lands belong to *us*. I continued, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. And thanks to insider agreements and falsified paperwork, the HOA has been profiting illegally at our expense. Gasps rippled through the audience. One woman shouted, "Is this true? Are they really doing this?" I nodded, yes. And it's not just my property. Several lots in Willow Creek are involved. They've been designating residential land as available for commercial use without our knowledge or consent. Meanwhile, key members of the HOA board have been receiving kickbacks from a regional oil company. The room exploded into chaos. People began shouting questions, accusations flying in every direction. Mrs. Hargrove tried to regain control, stammering excuses and denials. But no one was listening anymore. The trust she built over years as HOA president was crumbling right before her eyes. Then Mr. Grayson stood up, his deep voice cutting through the noise. "I've lived here for 20 years, he said firmly. They told me my backyard was underutilized and leased part of it to build storage units. I never saw a dime of the profits." Sarah chimed in next, her voice trembling with emotion. "They pressured me into signing papers I didn't understand. Said it was for the good of the neighborhood. Turns out they sold half my driveway to install a parking lot." One by one, neighbors shared their stories, each revelation hitting harder than the last. Mrs. Hargrove looked like a deer caught in headlights, unable to defend herself against the flood of anger and betrayal. By the time I revealed the bank records linking her to the oil conglomerate, the room was electric with outrage. Finally, someone shouted, "Resign. All of you, resign." The chant spread quickly, growing louder until it filled the entire space. Cornered and humiliated, Mrs. Hargrove and the rest of the board had no choice but to step down. As they slunk out of the room, I felt a surge of relief, but also resolve. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Outside, as the sun set over Willow Creek, I realized something important. This fight wasn't just about stopping corruption. It was about reclaiming our voices. And now, finally, we were being heard. The fallout from the HOA meeting was swift and chaotic, but it wasn't over yet. The resignation of Mrs. Hargrove and the rest of the board felt like a victory. But we all knew this wasn't just about forcing people to step down. It was about accountability, making sure no one could get away with exploiting us again. Within days, the story spread beyond Willow Creek. Local news outlets picked up on the scandal, running headlines about the corrupt HOA and its ties to the oil conglomerate. Reporters camped outside my house, eager for interviews, but I turned most of them away. This wasn't about fame or attention. It was about justice. Instead, I worked closely with John Martins and law enforcement to ensure the investigation went as deep as possible. Police raided the HOA offices, seizing computers, files, and financial records. Investigators uncovered even more evidence of illegal activity: forged documents, falsified bank statements, and secret agreements that implicated not only Evelyn Hargrove, but also several other high-ranking members of the association. One particularly damning discovery was a series of emails between Hargrove and executives at the oil company, detailing how they planned to bypass zoning laws by targeting quiet neighborhoods where residents were less likely to push back. As charges were filed against those involved, the community began to heal, but slowly. For weeks, neighbors gathered in driveways and parks, sharing stories of how they'd been manipulated or coerced into giving up parts of their property. Some had lost small sections of land without realizing it until now. Others had unknowingly signed contracts that allowed developers to use their yards for storage units or parking spaces. Everyone had been affected in some way, and the betrayal cut deep. Still, there was a newfound sense of unity among us. People who once kept to themselves became vocal advocates for transparency and fairness. Sarah organized weekly meetings to discuss rebuilding trust within the neighborhood. Mr. Grayson, who used to be so quiet and reserved, volunteered to help draft new guidelines for a temporary oversight committee to manage things until a proper HOA board could be elected. Even Tom got involved, using his HVAC skills to fix neglected equipment in the community center. But the scars remained. Late one evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I thought about everything we'd been through. The gas station construction site still loomed next door, an ugly reminder of what had happened, but demolition crews were scheduled to tear it down soon. The land would eventually be restored, though it would take time. Just like healing our community would take time. I also couldn't ignore the lingering fear. During the investigation, threats had come regularly. Dead animals appeared on doorsteps, tires were slashed, and anonymous notes warned me to back off. At first, it terrified me, but then something shifted inside me. Every threat only strengthened my resolve. They could try to intimidate me, but they couldn't silence me. Not anymore. One night, Sarah came over with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. We sat on the porch together, talking about the future. "Do you think it'll ever feel normal again?" she asked, her voice soft. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe not completely, but maybe that's okay. Maybe this will make us stronger, not just as neighbors, but as people." She smiled faintly. "You've changed, you know. You're different now." I nodded, knowing exactly what she meant. Before all this, I was content to live quietly, keeping my head down and avoiding conflict. But now I understood the importance of standing up, not just for myself, but for others. Fighting for what's right isn't always easy, but it's worth it. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, I felt a quiet kind of peace settle over me. The battle may have been won, but the war for fairness and integrity continued. And if anyone tried to take advantage of us again, they'd find out exactly what happens when you mess with Willow Creek. Months passed, and Willow Creek began to transform, not just physically, but emotionally. The unfinished gas station that had once been a symbol of corruption was finally demolished, leaving behind an empty lot waiting for new life. Slowly, the neighborhood came together to decide what should replace it. Some suggested turning it into a community garden. Others proposed a small park where kids could play. Whatever we chose, it would belong to all of us, a shared space built on trust and collaboration. The legal process dragged on longer than any of us expected. Evelyn Hargrove and several other former HOA members faced charges ranging from fraud to conspiracy. While justice moved at its own pace, the impact of their actions lingered in subtle ways. Neighbors who had once avoided each other now exchanged warm smiles and waves. Conversations flowed more freely, no longer weighed down by fear or suspicion. It wasn't perfect. There were still disagreements, of course, but there was something different in the air. Hope. For me, things changed too. My role as a county inspector took on new meaning. Before, I'd seen my job as just another part of keeping communities safe. Now I understood how much power ordinary people have when they stand together. I started volunteering with local advocacy groups, teaching workshops on property rights, and helping homeowners navigate complicated legal systems. It felt good to turn anger into action, to use what I'd learned to protect others from going through the same nightmare. One evening, as autumn painted the trees in fiery shades of orange and red, I hosted a small gathering at my house. Tom grilled burgers while the kids ran around the backyard with Sarah's children. Mr. Grayson showed up unexpectedly, carrying a 6-pack of soda and wearing a rare smile. "Thought you might need reinforcements," he said gruffly, setting the drinks on the table. We laughed, ate, and talked late into the night, sharing stories about everything that had happened and everything we hoped for the future. At one point, Sarah raised her glass in a toast. to Lisa," she said, her voice filled with warmth, "for reminding us that we're stronger when we stick together." Everyone cheered, and though I felt a blush creep up my cheeks, I couldn't help but smile. This journey hadn't been easy, but it had taught me something invaluable. Standing up for yourself isn't just about protecting your own piece of the world. It's about making sure everyone gets a fair shot. Later that night, after the guests had gone home and the house was quiet, I stood outside looking up at the stars. The cool breeze carried the faint scent of fallen leaves, and for the first time in months, I felt truly at peace. Yes, scars remained. From the land torn apart by bulldozers to the relationships fractured by betrayal. But scars tell stories. And this one was about resilience. Willow Creek wasn't perfect, and maybe it never would be, but perfection wasn't the goal anymore. What mattered was that we'd fought back and won. We'd reclaimed not only our land but also our voices. No one could take that away from us. As I headed back inside, I paused for a moment to glance at the empty lot next door. In my mind, I pictured what it could become: a garden bursting with flowers, a playground echoing with laughter, or even just a quiet patch of green where neighbors could sit and talk. Whatever it turned into, it would reflect who we were now, a community united by courage and determination. Life may throw challenges our way, but sometimes those challenges bring out the best in us. For Willow Creek, the fight against corruption had done exactly that. And as long as we remembered what we'd been through and why, we'd never let anyone trample over us again.